This is the Dollemore Daily, and I'm Jesse Dollemore. Tucker Carlson from Fox News isn't just a petty little man and a loathsome demagogue. He's not just a rich brat who's never done a single day of actual work in his exceedingly privileged life. And he's not just a dude who always has a look plastered on his face like a dog who's super confused about a magic trick he just saw. Tucker Carlson is also a white supremacist. Just because he wears a suit and tie and reads from a teleprompter each weekday evening on a major cable news network doesn't mean he's not a virulent, venom-spewing radical. Tucker Carlson doesn't have to look like his unwashed, toothless brethren to be one of them. In many ways, he's more dangerous because he passes. He passes as respectable. He passes as conventional. When in fact, he is anything but. He's more dangerous maybe because while he would never get his own hands dirty with the committing of a violent hate crime, he promotes and legitimizes the very ideologies that whip into a frenzy the types who will get their hands dirty. The other night on his evening white supremacy fireside chat, Tucker Carlson made a ridiculous and impassioned claim about white supremacy and the very real threats of violence that its adherents pose to many non-white and marginalized groups here in the United States and around the globe. He, with a straight face, claimed that not only it's not an actual threat, white supremacy, but that it's a lie and a hoax.
But the whole thing is a lie. If you were to assemble a list, a hierarchy of concerns, of problems this country faces, where would white supremacy be on the list? Right up there with Russia, probably. It's actually not a real problem in America. The combined membership of every white supremacist organization in this country would be able to fit inside a college football stadium? I mean, seriously. This is a country where the average person is getting poorer, where the suicide rate is spiking. White supremacy, that's the problem. This is a hoax. Just like the Russia hoax. It's a conspiracy theory used to divide the country and keep a hold on power. That's exactly what's going on. Victor Davis Hanson knows this better than anyone. He's a senior fellow at the Hoover Institution, and he joins us tonight. Professor, thank you very much for coming on. White supremacy, I've lived here 50 years. I've never met anybody, not one person, who ascribes to white supremacy. I don't know a single person who thinks that's a good idea. They're making this up. And it's a talking point which they are using to help them in this election cycle, obviously, because Russia died. But my question to you is, what does it do to the country? At what cost?
Now, before I prove Tucker wrong with something his nightly broadcast is sadly bereft of, which is an evidence-based outlook, I want to talk about why on earth he would make stupid claims such as this. Why would he claim there isn't such a thing as white supremacy or an organized movement of white supremacists in the United States when he has been openly and aggressively praised by some of its most visible leaders? Here is the face-punchable Nazi, Richard Spencer, who seems to have no lack of positive things to say about his fellow traveler. If someone were to ask me who's the most based, interesting, and impactful mainstream conservative commentator, the answer is easy. Tucker. He's willing to go places the others aren't, and he can be sharp and witty, a definite improvement over people like Bill O'Reilly. And here is former Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan just today, David Duke, laughably agreeing with Tucker about white supremacy being a lie. Tucker is right. White supremacy is a Zio media conspiracy theory. The term is itself a lie. Millions of white activists are not, quote-unquote, supremacists. We seek not to oppress or destroy any race. Human rights for all, even for white people. Stop anti-white racism. I mean, when the former Grand Wizard of the KKK says white supremacy is a hoax, it must be right? Look, Tucker Carlson is certainly not guilty of being a white supremacist based solely on the warm words of praise and that avowed racists, white nationalists, and white supremacists have for him. But it absolutely highlights common value, common philosophy, and common ideology. I mean, I don't have diseases like David Duke or Richard Spencer tweeting attaboys to me after I articulate the things I believe. They're not calling me or the words I speak based, interesting, or impactful. Now, as far as Tucker Carlson's claim that the whole thing is a lie and a hoax, weird, right? Weird that a rich white dude who traffics in the same racist white supremacist language and same racist white supremacist conspiracy theories doesn't think white supremacy is a problem. Come on, Tucker, you intellectual toilet brush. In April of 2017, the Government Accountability Office published a 62-page report titled Countering Violent Extremism and found that at the time of its publishing, of the 85 violent extremist incidents that resulted in deaths since September 12, 2001, far right-wing violent extremist groups were responsible for 62 of them, or 73%. This report documents dozens and dozens of incidents involving white nationalists, neo-Confederates, neo-Nazis, skinheads, and white supremacists. Incidents fueled by racist hate that resulted in death. A lie, a hoax. Tucker. In May of 2017, a joint intelligence bulletin from the Department of Homeland Security and the FBI stated that we assess most white supremacist extremist lethal violence over the next year very likely will derive from the capabilities of lone offenders or small cells, rather than the resources of larger groups, due to the decentralized and often disorganized status of the white supremacist extremist movement. Although plot-derived mass casualty violence remains possible, we judge it more likely that violence will continue to be spontaneous and involve targets of opportunity. Despite a lack of shooting attacks in 2016, firearms likely will continue to pose the greatest threat of lethal violence by white supremacist extremists due to their availability and ease of use. And that, again, is a joint intelligence bulletin entitled White Supremacist Extremism Poses Persistent Threat of Lethal Violence. And that's from the Department of Homeland Security and the Federal Bureau of Investigation. A lie, a hoax. Come on, Tucker. And as always, I encourage you not just to take my word for it. Listen to Christopher Wray, the director of the aforementioned FBI. Listen to him explain in sworn House Judiciary Committee testimony that the Bureau has made about 100 arrests of domestic terrorism suspects in the past 9 months, and that most investigations of that kind involve white supremacy.
Needless to say, we take domestic terrorism or hate crime, regardless of ideology, extremely seriously, I can assure you. And we are aggressively pursuing it, using both counterterrorism resources and criminal investigative resources, and partnering closely with our state and local partners. In just the last little while, we've had cases involving, for example, the Coast Guard lieutenant who was planning an attack on elected officials and TV anchors here in this area. We've had militia members.
Was that motivated by a white supremacy belief?
I think it would be a version of that, certainly. Our focus, when you asked about the categorization, our focus is on the violence. We, the FBI, don't investigate ideology no matter how repugnant. We investigate violence. And any extremist ideology, when it turns to violence, we're all over it. And we've had, in fact, and that you don't have to just take my word for it, just in the first 3 quarters of this year, we've had more domestic terrorism arrests than the prior year, and it's about the same number of arrests as we have on the international terrorism side.
I ask you to clarify that.
We have, through the third quarter of this fiscal year, had about give or take 100 arrests in the international terrorism side, which includes the homegrown violent extremism. This year. But we've also had just about the same number, again, don't quote me to the exact digit, on the domestic terrorism side. And I will say that a majority of the domestic terrorism cases that we've investigated are motivated by some version of what you might call white supremacist violence, but it includes other things as well.
Did you hear that, Tucker? White supremacy isn't the only domestic terror issue that we're faced with, of course, but it most certainly is very real. A very real problem and a very real threat. A lie, a hoax. Why don't you tell that to the families of victims of radical right-wing white supremacist terrorism, Tucker? Tell that to the victims of the terror attack at the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pennsylvania, or the Shabbat Poway Synagogue in Poway, California. Why don't you explain it to the loved ones of the dozens of victims in El Paso, that the violence that was visited upon them was a lie or a hoax? Tell that to the entirety of this nation who witnessed the scourge of radical racist white supremacist extremism descend upon the city of Charlottesville. I guess these very fine people, as your dear leader calls them, I guess they aren't white supremacists or white nationalists. Is this just a lie and a hoax as well? Right, Tucker, you feckless overpaid clown. Tucker, you yourself are a revolting white supremacist. Your nightly yapping in service to the dangerous and injurious racist philosophies don't go unnoticed. You can't spend years building a house upon a foundation of white supremacy and then once it turns to sand and the truth begins to wash it away, deny what your exact address was. Don't be a whimpering simp, Tucker Carlson. You know, weeks like this are brutal for independent media. YouTube demonetizes everything and anything, even remotely related to these important topics. If you've found some value in the research and the facts that I just laid out, I would invite you to support my work as an independent creator right here on YouTube by clicking the join button to become a channel member. You can pick your level of support, which starts at less than $2 a month, and take part in the rewards. But more importantly, you can know that you are helping in a very serious and important way to support independent media just like this. If only 1% of my audience clicked that join button, I would be completely untethered from concerns about YouTube's policies about demonetization. Anyway, I really hope you'll consider it. Thank you. I appreciate you.